Hi, everybody, and welcome to the fourth episode of Terry and Olly Talk Teaching. This is me, Ollie, in Japan, and we've got Terry over in London. How you going, Terry?
Very good, thanks. Very, very good indeed. Tired? Well, that's probably more about age than anything else, but yeah, all
Agent
going well
weather.
here.
Good. That's excellent. And today we're going to be focusing on creating positive relationships with pupils. We're going to share our ideas from our experience, and at the end, I'll give you all the details about how you can get in touch with us. So let's get started, Terry. I think I'd like to start the discussion today. I'll hand it over to you, talking about the balance in the role and the teacher demeanour, as I know you've got a lot of expertise on the matter. So yeah, what do you feel?
Yeah, well, being somebody that spends a lot of time looking at the qualified teacher standards, which are big here in the UK. I know you've got your own varieties and variations over there in Japan, which are going to be very similar. Standard seven, people always focus when I go into schools on the first part of it, which is behavior management. And they often forget about the other part, which is developing positive relationships with pupils, whatever their age, from reception age all the way up to sixth form, which of course is very different. And the point about this is that balance has changed. I think when I started teaching in the late 80s, I was teaching with old timers coming up to retirement who started in the 1960s. They were all about discipline. They could be tyrants in the classroom. They never had to think for a second about developing a positive relationship with groups of children or an individual child. It was beyond a lot of them. When I started, some of these guys were still throwing board dusters at kids' heads. You know,
Wow.
the kind of corporal punishment. The cane had gone a few years earlier, but these were the guys that were steeped in it.
Yeah.
And that's what they were still doing. They'd never spent a minute of their life thinking about developing a positive relationship with students. Fast forward all this time, and it's so important. You've got
Yeah.
to get that balance, but it's even probably more because schools often have such rigorous systems now that new teachers can follow far more than I think when we were starting, when you had to go it alone. You've got to focus more on that second part. And I just to finish off on this introductory blurb, I've always struggled to think, well, what is the relationship that you're trying to establish? What's the nearest to a family relationship? Although you're in loco parentis legally, you're not the parents and you shouldn't try to be. Disaster. You're not the kids' friends, whatever their age. And we know that down that path can lead to more disaster. The nearest I've ever got to it is that you are the strict, firm, but friendly auntie or uncle. That's the nearest I can get to. And if going into teaching, you can constantly think, am I being that strict, firm, but friendly and understanding auntie or uncle? Then I think you're likely to get it about right. That's what I'd
I
say
think,
anyway.
yeah, I think that's a very good image, actually. I don't think the tyrant really works in today's society. I know I was probably on the tail end of it. Senior
Yeah.
school in 1986, we had a few tyrant teachers. There wasn't so much of the throwing chalk, but we had those teachers. But I think if you tried that now, you'd be far out of step. I mean, a lot of students wouldn't put up with it like we
Yeah.
would have done. Maybe the fear factor's gone a little bit, which is good. It should never be that job. And I think, yeah, I really like what you said about the balance because on any given day, we're secondary teachers, of course, so we can go from that relationship with an 11-year-old is completely different to a relationship with an 18-year-old who you could see the next hour after each other. So I think once you learn a few tricks of the trade that hopefully we'll go through today, that it will kind of become really, really almost second nature, natural to think, right, how I've been with year seven, I've now got to be completely different with maybe my year 11 class with exams coming up or my 2 year A level course or whatever. So yeah, really interesting start there. And I totally agree with the aunt and uncle. And we'll come on to boundaries, which I think is what you're getting at later in our chat.
Yeah.
Um, so I think obviously from what you kind of outlined there, that creating positive relationships is probably the key to teaching in this day and age.
Yeah.
Maybe in different times gone by, you could get away with it more if you just did what we used to call chalk and talk. But now there's so much more to the job. So I think for me, the first thing I'd like to just give an overview and hear your opinion on it is showing an interest in the student as as teachers, hopefully, or one thing we've all got in common is an interest in pupils or
Yeah,
students. I will use that word interchangeably in this chat today. So I think really a good way to build these positive relationships is to show them that you have an interest in them. I did a survey recently, totally non-scientific. I was doing a workshop on classroom management, and I asked a grade 11 class what they see as a good teacher, and I gave them lots of options, and the most common was teachers that show an interest. And I think you can't underestimate the fact that just getting to know something about a student extra apart from their grades will give you so much power with them that you can use when you need it in different circumstances, and also it can really make them feel special from the teacher. I was listening to a YouTube video the other day, and a head was talking about having these moments that you can say to a student something that they will remember. So he was talking about he'd watched a student in a school show, and the next day he went to the student who wasn't particularly a good student and said, "You were excellent last night, well done." And for that student to know a teacher's noticed them, knows a little bit more about them out of class, you can't really underestimate the power in that. And you can use that when you need them to do that little bit of extra work, or when you need them to be quiet in class. If you've got that relationship, and they know that you see them more than just one in 30, and they
yeah,
see you as more than just the dictator in the classroom, it's going to really build those relationships. So my thanks to be showing interest, know about their lives, go to the extracurricular events, be seen around school with them, and comment on it. So if you've seen them in the school football team or whatever,
yeah,
make sure you comment on it. Even if it's, one thing I use, as you know, worked a lot on in my way of doing this is getting to know what football team they support. And that's such an easy way to have a quick bit of banter with the students before the class to say, okay, oh, good win last night, or whatever. And then that's like a nice start off that you know a little bit about that student, and show them that you're interested. Just before I let you in on any comments. So at the moment, my office is located by near another kind of open room where I leave school every day to get to my car park. And about 3 days a week, there's three girls there who are in a bell ringing club. We didn't have many bell ringing clubs in the first school
yeah.
we worked at, did we? But these are three very quiet girls, and I make sure every day when I see them, I stop, have a little bit of a joke about the bell noise, have a bit of a comment, so they know that I've got an interest in their club. And at the moment, I'm trying to talk them into performing at an IB assembly that we do monthly. So just something like that. See what's going on, learn something about the student, and in time, you will have one or two things about the majority of your students, and that's a really good in to building that relationship.
Yeah, yeah, really important. And there's different ways you can do that. I mean, obviously, just being out on duty in the yard or the
Yep.
corridor, or as children are moving from one classroom to another, those little informal you just tweak the relationship, the demeanor slightly to be a little bit more open than you can be when you've got a row of 30 students in front of you. And you can learn a lot and, put it in your memory box and use it when you need to. And you're absolutely right about the extracurricular stuff, making that effort to actually attend things and be part of them. Tired though you are, worn out though you are, it does pay off, there's no doubt. And of course, going to primary, there's a lot of effort goes in at primary for teachers who deliberately engage with parents to find out things they need to know. So, from reception upwards, they're constantly engaging on a daily basis because these little mites are coming in. They've not been very well overnight. They've been upset over something. Something's happened in the family. They've got a toileting issue, whatever it might be. The teacher needs to know, and it builds on a daily basis, and it builds up this picture they have of this young human being
Yeah.
that they've got to deal with, on a consistent basis. We know that older children will hide things and
Yeah.
are obviously more self-reliant as kind of semi-adult. But when they're very, very young, everything has to be known. You've got to know what they're about. And I have to say, secondary teachers do get to know. They have more children to deal with, of course. That's
Sure.
part of it. The level at which primary school teachers know their kids is astonishing. I mean, the effort that is put in to constantly renew this information and to act on it and to deal with it is amazing. The dedication, but the extracurricular stuff, yeah. As you said, just one little nugget, one little thing quietly said.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh,
you know,
it can make a
turning
world
turning
of
a
difference.
conversation towards the slightly reticent or quiet child in the
Yeah.
classroom and
Yeah.
involving them. You don't. It can have a profound impact,
Yeah.
and particularly where you've got those middle of, without being too unkind, the kind of average middle of the road, quiet, unobtrusive, well-behaved students, often girls, certainly in
Mm.
secondary, they're often girls. They can be boys. Nobody really takes a lot of time to get to know them or take an interest in them because they're no bother. They're not outstanding. They don't cause anybody in problems. They quietly get on with their lives. Nobody ever asks about them. And
Yeah.
just one little conversation or kind word, you can just it can have such an impact.
Oh, that's totally true. I'm going to come to that later when towards the end, we're going to
Sure.
talk about form tutoring and how we can
Yeah,
do that. But yeah,
yeah,
a couple of maybe things we can do. Really take the point about secondary, apart from the form, which we'll see every day. Sometimes, depending on what you teach, of course, but we're both humanities teachers, and
yeah.
if it's a discrete subject, might only see them once or twice a week.
Mm,
Complete different to primary. An English teacher, maths teacher, 4 or 5 times a week. So you've really got to make that hour, 2 hours a week count. So you really need to learn quickly, and you can do that, of course, through speaking to other staff, their own form tutors. I've even been to form tutors just to try and get an in with students that I've found hard to connect with. So it's a really good thing to just have a quick chat in the staff room. Tell me about
yeah,
student A. Oh, they like that, do they? I'm going to use that little nugget.
yeah.
So yeah, so I can see the total difference in where we are as secondary down to primary. But yeah, as I say, we'll look at maybe the quieter students. That's a really good point you've made about that. So I'd like you to lead on the next part is thinking about the positive relationships and the need for clear boundaries with students in doing that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it bleeds isn't into, doesn't it, the behaviour management.
Yeah,
Um, but the boundaries and the word that comes to mind in answering your question is fairness. Fairness is a concept, particularly in all children, but particularly in teenagers and adolescents, which is colossal.
yeah,
What is fair and unfair? We all know that life is not fair and the world is not fair. As adults, we've long accepted that and we have to negotiate around it. Teenagers and adolescents do not understand that the world is not fair and they don't want it to be unfair. So you being consistent in the way you treat them within classes across years as groups is just vitally important. You cannot have your favourites. I mean, it still astonishes me that I still hear of students that think that teachers have favourites,
yeah,
or there's an expression, informally in the staff room, which might make it appear that teachers have favourites. I don't get it. It's not something I ever understood, and I worked assiduously from day one in the profession to make it very clear that I was never going to have favourites, even if internally, because they're human beings, you tend to warm to some human beings more
mm,
than you do others, particularly those that give you fewer problems. Although sometimes it can be the tricky customers that you have a fondness for, to
100%. Yeah,
understand that they've got issues. But that consistency is just vital. It's not even how consistent you think you're being; it's what is perceived by the children, by
yeah,
the pupils,
yeah,
and they will have even firmer boundaries about it. One of the things I always learned was if if you've got your troublemakers and your difficult kids and kids with certain behavioural needs, will find it hard to just sit still at one end of the scale and can be
yeah,
quite disruptive at the other end of the scale. When the goodies in the class do something wrong and contravene your rules and regulations in the schools, you've got to come down on them like a ton of bricks
yeah,
in front of their baddies. For the
yeah,
baddies' sake and for the goodies' sake, you've got to be seen to being completely above the law. And I'd even go in, strangely, I've even gone in even harder on some of the good kids because I've been able to say to them, well, I do expect a better of you. I'm sorry. I got used to you being a certain way and I came to rely on your maturity and understanding, and you've let me and yourself down. So that's why I've come down even harder on you. They don't quite grasp that you're doing it also for the so-called baddies,
sure,
because you've got to take that holistic view beyond their individual needs. Some very
sure,
bright kids do get it.
yeah,
I've had conversations with kids where they've gone, "Yeah, you were right, and that's not fair, as it's he shouldn't get told off all the time if I'm not."
Yeah.
But that sense of fairness is ingrained. And to just extend the point, the boundaries, it goes back to our original point about being the fair and strict
Yeah.
uncle or auntie. As soon as you're getting over familiar, you're starting to see yourself as friends with them or anything like that, you've got to stop and have a strong word with yourself and have a
Yeah.
think. Or ask somebody in who's
Mm.
experienced that you can trust. You can't always trust everybody that's experienced and say, am I getting this right? Do you
Yeah.
think my demeanor and relationship, am I getting this right? Please tell me if I'm not in your experience. I'm quite happy to adjust because you can go off a longer path and be a long way away from home before you
Yeah.
know it. I think that's what you meant. Is that what you
Yeah.
meant? Yeah.
Excellent points. Yeah, just pick up on a few of those. I think consistency is obviously vital, and students will know if you're being inconsistent, and they will, as you say, act upon it. Um, and they will really, as you said, really play a big part on the fairness. I remember, something that stick in your mind. I was with I bumped into a group of lads, one in my form, three who weren't, and they were doing something wrong, not particularly bad, but I gave them, put them in their place, telling off, and student came up to me, and it was nearly his last year of school, and he said, "Oh, well, actually, I thought you were a bit harder on this other student than me because you don't know him that well." He felt a little bit put out, and I thought, "Oh God, I didn't intentionally do that, but." The students to see that really made me think, and that probably happened 15 years ago, and I can still remember thinking really bad about myself for doing that. So students will really know the fairness, and you've got to be fairer than fair, especially with the students who people perceive. Again, when I was a new teacher, as you know, I was always very big on form, and
Yeah.
some kids say, "Oh well, they're in your form, they're your favourites." And when certainly young as grade 7, they'd be quite openly say that to you, and you think, wow, I'm kind of maybe doing that without realizing it, and I've got to pull back and make sure that I'm being seen
Yeah.
as being fair. And then I think I went the other way of being overly fair. And as you say, you've got to overly make the good kids, the ones you get on with, put them straight when they are going badly. So I've experienced some of that, so I can totally agree with what you're saying. I think the thing about boundaries for me is they've got to be clear in building positive relationships, because unfortunately, sometimes students will give them an inch, they'll take a mile,
Yeah.
and some will try to take advantage of how they see. Well, okay, Mr. Furnival, I get on with him. I'm gonna not do this, or I'm going to do this that maybe someone else wouldn't get away with. And if you don't stop it quite quickly and have that boundary, like you say, the firm but fair uncle and aunt, then unfortunately some will take advantage of what they see. So I used to let my form come into when we worked together, come in at break time, and yeah, every now and again they'd bring friends, and every now and again they'd leave something on the desk, and you'd get a like, "Oh, well, you'll pick it up, won't you, sir?" And you're like, whoa,
Yeah.
now I need to reset. Right, I'm shutting the room down for a couple of days. All right,
Yeah.
I'm going to really lay the law down. So I think with boundaries, the relationships, it's got to be, they've got to know both inside the lesson and outside the lesson what you what they can get away with and what they can't. Because if they do start to see you as a family member, which they shouldn't, but they do, then they'll treat you like they do mum and dad, and play you off against
Yeah.
someone else, etc.
Yeah. It's a very good point. I remember once a very wise teacher very early on in my career said, "You've got to be careful. They can mistake, and they will mistake. Children will mistake because they're not fully developed. They will mistake kindness as weakness.
Yeah,
They can."
yeah,
And that's a very hard thing to learn for anybody at any stage of life in dealing with other human beings. But with
mm,
kids, it's just inherent and natural. They can often see kindness as weakness. And when you get those little signs, as you said, about the thing on the desk,
yeah.
don't ignore them
No, got
because
to step
those
in.
kids are telling you something.
Mm,
They're actually being brutally honest.
yeah,
Whereas, of course, adults would just scheme away to take
mm,
advantage of your kindness or weakness. The kids, it's more transparent and on the surface, and you'll be able
yeah.
to tell that you're getting it wrong. So I think it's a great anecdote. It's a
Yeah,
great point.
thanks. Yeah, and I think it's a lesson that a lot of us, hopefully our listeners who are new into the profession, you're going to learn it, and you're going to have to
Yeah,
do that. And what you shouldn't be scared of is making that stand and resetting boundaries, because yeah, you might get a sulk for a day or two, but they'll come back, they'll come around.
yeah,
And I've,
yeah,
I've, yeah, I've experienced that a lot of times, where especially secondary form tutor, where you've had to reset, and yeah, you'll get a sulk, but they'll come around 99% of the
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Um, The next point I want to lead about in creating positive relationships is just you and your approachability as a teacher. I think a really good thing that in creating positive relationships is taking the time to listen to students. Now, that might be outside of the classroom when we do more on classroom management. If you need to take them outside to have a chat, it's far better than in front of an audience. It might be in detentions. It might be in just kind of a word of you at break. But if you notice something up with a student, but even if a student's not doing what you want, I think even though you might not give them the answer they want and you can't do what they want, I think listening is really important because a student going away knowing, well, this teacher listened to me, that's going to start building trust. And it's going to, as you say, build without realizing it, the boundaries. Say, yes, I've heard that. However, I've had students trying to get off PE for using excuses and trying to use me as their way into getting support. And in the end, you've got to listen. It's okay. However, you still need to go to PE. And girls in PE in secondary school, as you know, is some of that many of them will not want to do it. So even though that you've listened to them, you don't get what they want, then that will be um, the step of a good relationship. And it's really important to see from their perspective. You spoke in previous ones about maybe school isn't the greatest place. Maybe there's other things going on in their life. But for us, I've got that one now. I've got 30 students. There's 30 different stories in that room, and there's
No,
30 different ways of thinking about my lesson. Perhaps I don't like the way I do this or that, or
yeah,
perhaps, that they've come in from a bad day at home. So I think being approachable and trying not to think as I probably did in my early years, but yeah, but you've got to get that homework done. But I need you to do this X, Y, and Z in class because I've written a lesson plan on it. Try to take a step back. Okay, what's the student trying to say? How are they seeing my lesson? How are they seeing the day at school? And be empathetic. Show empathy to them. Think, okay, I can't give everything for you. However, I'm going to work with you as much as I can to try to help you along the way. Remember one girl, grade 7, in my last year in the school we worked at, had a real big thing with her and her earrings. And she came to school and I said, look, I'm going to have to take them out. But I didn't just say, right, shout at her, go and see the head of year. We had a good chat about it. I went with her. I was there at the time. She was crying her eyes out, but I didn't ignore them, and don't ever do this. Don't overlook things because that student knew the rules. She was breaking the rules, but she tried to get them done over the summer. They weren't healing. The school wouldn't allow it. So show empathy for the situation. And I mentioned this anecdote because that student now is a teacher
right,
and kept in touch with her mother quite a bit after school because I moved back to Japan and she used to give me updates. And she mentioned that a few times afterwards, how they really
yeah,
appreciated it. Look, I can't change the school rules for you personally. I don't mind if year sevens wear earrings, but I've got to toe the company line here. However, I'm going to show empathy towards you, go along with you, and kind of create a good relationship. Even though that girl on that day was absolutely devastated, I wouldn't back down, and I had to take her to get them out. So yeah, approachable's the summary. Anything you want to add on?
yeah. I
Or
mean, the empathy point, yeah, it should be an empathetic profession. Not always, but it should be. But it's hard, isn't it? Some
yeah,
people are very empathetic, get taken advantage of. It's a bit like
sure.
that kindness as weakness thing again. You get in the balance. You can think too much about, well, how do the kids see it? What do the kids think of me? What do they think of the lesson? What do they think of this? And I've said this to many young teachers along the way who are struggling with relationships or behavior management or whatever it might be in that area. You've got can't take it. You can't be lying awake at night worrying about what the kids think about you and your relationship with them. You've got to be able to shut off, or it will kill you. They are not going home and getting the bus and seeing their friends and family thinking about you.
No,
Don't. But you've all of that stuff can be quite difficult. You've got to know when to shut off, be empathetic to a point, and I think the examples you gave are good ones, but know that at the end of the day, you are in charge. Society expects a certain role of you, and for your own sanity, just switch off and
yeah,
at a certain point and realize that not every battle can be won. Not every child can be won over. Not everybody needs to like you.
no,
That takes a long time, doesn't it, in life to realize that you don't
yeah,
have to be liked. It's nice if you are, but you're never going to win everybody over. So don't try if you can avoid it. There are people we've talked with people who have gone. and I'm talking way past the tyrants stage that I started with. In the modern age, I work with people that are much harder, thicker skinned, much harder nosed, and often the pupils really like them because
Yeah,
they detect there's nowhere to go with this person.
yeah,
What you see is what you get. And there's no point in me even trying it on. There's just
yeah,
something inherent that person has projected. I don't even bother because I'm
yeah.
not that approachable. So although we're trying to say be approachable and empathetic, if you're naturally not, you can still be a really good teacher.
Yeah.
Just be wary that you are a little bit too cold.
I think I really like that. I think just thinking as you talk, I think that may be a good thing for young teachers is watch how PE teachers deal with students, because they have a slightly different relationship. They're out on the
Yeah,
field, they're acting as the referee, the umpire, or whatever. And I've seen a lot of PE teachers in my career who they're generally popular, 'cause they're generally young, they're fit, healthy, fit, but they are quite good at, I'm stereotyping here, at having a quite clear, well, this is what's happening. You often see students don't try it on as much with PE teachers. I don't know why. I'm just thinking that as you talk, but I've seen a few and how they've got that look. So if you're young and you're thinking, oh, I've got to get the balance right, which is hard, of course, maybe have a look at how a PE teacher does it. Not necessarily in PE, but just watch them if they're head of year or as they're, lining up in duty or stuff. I think they generally, I'm talking the three schools I've worked at, I've seen that consistently. Hmm.
yeah. I think PE teachers naturally are keying into a lot of pupils' enthusiasms of sport and activity. They're delivering something where the kids are letting off steam and getting physical
Yeah,
exercise, endorphins, and all of that. And they've got to be able to trust them. So trust is a word we haven't talked about because if you're on a whole playing field or in a huge
yeah,
gym, you can't, it's not like rows of children ranged in front of you. There's
no,
got to be a level of trust to say, look, you're with the shot puts today. Please don't maim each other with them. We've got these set ways of doing things. I trust you to do it correctly. And I think that's what PE teachers find easier to do often and are good at.
yeah,
Um, uh, but that trust thing, that's something we maybe should pursue because the children need to know that you are telling them, I trust you. It's not that I have to keep my beady eye on you. Because
mm,
when we talk about behavior management systems, which we'll do in a later video, we'll talk about this again. But you've got to be able to say to them, look, this is the rule, this is the regulation, this is the relationship and the boundary. I'm now going to trust you
yeah,
to get this right. And
yeah.
it goes back to that conversation you have with the goodies. When they get it right, wrong, you've got to make it clear you've, you've contravened, you've let my trust down. I placed a lot of
Yeah,
trust in you. That's why I'm upset.
you can do a lot with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And trusting, of course, is empowering. And when once they succeed in what you've asked, and we can do different things with different needs. And yeah, I think that really does help build relationships, and that celebrates success, which we're going to come to. I was wanted to let's focus actually any like tips for actually in the classroom in your 60-minute or whatever lesson, building so many little tidbits on creating positive relationships in the actual lesson time too.
100%. The biggest one that comes to me now, and it's something I wasn't as good at as I should have been. In fact, I was pretty poor at it. I had to use other methods because I didn't have this as a skill. Learning the children's names,
Okay.
preferred names, accurate pronunciation of surnames and first names. And obviously, when you're in a city like London, hugely multi-ethnic with names, first and second names from all over the world, often difficult for British teachers to pronounce and understand. Learning the names is so important
Yeah.
because not only is it impressive, you're treating people as individuals,
Yeah.
and the children very much key into that. And it really does help when you're having a conversation, positive or negative, to use somebody's name, in any walk of life. And I see some teachers. I saw a teacher the other day who was an RSRE teacher who was only seen, she joined the school in September, and this is like early December. So she'd only seen them about 7 or 8 times. She knew every name
Brilliant.
in a class of 30 children.
Yeah.
And then when I asked further, the mentor said, well, she knows all 450 names of all the children she teaches. I mean, amazing. But
Yeah.
I could see straight away the impact that was having. That she knew the names and was in this very civil and polite way was talking to these people as individuals because she
Excellent.
had the respect for them to learn their names. And when you're reading out the register and there's a name that you cannot pronounce, and you know you're not going to pronounce it, don't make a fool of yourself. Just say, "Oh, and could you tell me how to pronounce this? And am I getting
Yeah.
this right?" And always give a rider, look, I might get these wrong. I'm really
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
I'm an
Use that a
idiot.
lot.
Sorry. Just let me know if I am. Just be open, admit your mistake.
Yeah.
Don't make a big issue of it because the kids then won't. You can have a bit of a laugh about it if you do get the
Yeah.
name wrong. They've got to be resilient too. Sometimes there
Mm.
can be a lack of that. But, but for me, because I wasn't the best at this, and I see such wonderful practice in people today learning the names and using them.
Yeah, I think that's totally true, and I think also that helps a lot with firstly behavior management. If you've got a little bit of noise going on in the back of the room, you say, "Oh, yeah, over there, be quiet."
Yeah,
John, be quiet. The difference is, oh, it's me. It's not like, oh, it's just a noise above my head. Whoa, you put a name on. And also, if you do, I like to walk around the room a lot. I make a big point of not standing at the front as much as I
yeah,
used.
yeah,
I don't think I was ever only did that, but sometimes when the kids are talking, I just go to the other end of the room, and with my back to some, I just say, "Okay, bang," and I'll pick on a name, and that student doesn't know it's coming, and so knowing name by name really helps you be able to call on people very quickly. I'm as bad, I don't know, but I'm bad at it as well. It's like, God, all these names. I mean, we must have thousands in our head. Well, I purposely at the moment, we do a lot of obviously computer work in my school as a lot, but I purposely, my lesson, I only do it on paper. So my little trick, even now, I can't remember every student's name that I teach. Every time there's a new handout, put your name on it. So as I walk around the room, I can see their name and then I've got it and I remember it. So a little tip there to keep the
yeah.
names.
Whatever it takes, it's important, and it
Yeah,
allows you to say things like, "Oh, Jenny, you had a
yeah,
great idea when we went round. I was talking to you earlier. Do you want to share it with the class?" Now, if Jenny is particularly one of those quiet girls that we alluded to before, that's gold dust.
yeah,
She may not
100%.
show it, but that will have a huge impact on her standing within the classroom, her own sense of herself. Um, Rather than what's your name? What's your
Yeah,
name? Oh,
it's
it's Jenny. Okay, then Jenny. It's still good, but you've lost the moment's coming
yeah.
on.
And from our point of view, we really like Jenny. We know she's good, but from her point of view, if we don't even know her name, that relationship apart that we can't be having a relationship with her. So from their point of view, oh, well, you know that boy's name, you know her name because they're always, noisy and whatever. So
Yeah,
obviously we learn the bad kids' names first because they're the ones we're telling 10 times a day to be quiet. But yeah, it's really interesting. It's how they perceive that. He doesn't even know my name after a month in class. That must be quite bad. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, I hold my hands up. I use a few little tricks because I'm too much in my head. One thing I'll talk about in the classroom about positive relationships is a couple of things that kind of link. Is one, it's enthusiasm for your subject. It's you've got to be living and breathing that subject with your students. If you're simply there to basically tell them what page to open,
yeah.
swap answers and tick them, yeah, you might be a nice person, but they're not going to have that buy-in with you. So I think enthusiasm for your subject is vital. And I think I like to break it up into either in key stage three units, but or topics, but even in key stage four, A level or IB that I've taught, it's really getting a journey with that class. So it's really good if you're doing GCSE maths or English or geography or whatever, or A level or IB. From the beginning, you make that a journey. We're going through this together. We'll have our successes together in our formatives, our summatives, and if you can really, I used kids used to take, oh yeah, whatever. So like, I teach a subject called Theory of Knowledge in the IB, which is it's not an elective. Everyone has to do it. It's only worth 3 points with an EE, but everyone has to. And it's quite abstract. So I'd oversell it because we used to do it first period, and the kids was, tired, and there was me bouncing around like an idiot. But they liked it, and they want to see that you're actually living and breathing it with them. So I think my thing about relationships in the classroom is overly love your subject, overly be part of it, and break your year or your course into little sections where you can have your little bits of success together.
Yeah, and then, you may find that when that does happen, you're in the corridor on duty, and the child will run up to you and say, Sir, saw this thing on the television last night,
Yeah,
online. It's about that volcano. And then and that's when you realize
yeah,
you're getting it right, because they see your enthusiasms and they want to add
yeah,
to them. And then the relationship is strong. So
yeah.
absolutely spot on. Yeah. If
Yeah,
you
it's
could achieve
brilliant.
that.
Yeah, I love that in the corridor thing. That must, oh yeah, I know. So
Yeah.
TKS is due next week. It's like, yeah, but they like that because you're actually giving them the attention that they might not be getting
Yeah.
elsewhere.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Um, Elsewhere in the classroom, I think, and I'll talk about this later with form tutor, but it's especially at secondary. You spoke about primary earlier, but relationships is celebrating success within the classroom, like really, applauding something that a student's done. As you said, listen as you're going around the classroom, get them to do it,
Yeah.
to speak in the class, celebrate success, even have little mini awards, and recognize achievement through that class. Because if they can see, now I know. It might be harder now. It certainly is in my present school about giving little awards, obviously with nut allergies, etc. But so we're not actually allowed in my school at the moment. But little cards of success we've done together in previous schools, little letters home, emails home, just little things where you've seen something and you celebrate that with the student, either in front of the whole class or, and this is a great one, when you got the kid that's too cool for school and you in the class, and at the end you say, actually, you were really good in that, and
Yeah.
then with maybe just their
Yeah.
mates there or no one else. That's
Yeah.
great when they hear that, and you can see they really like it, but they don't want to be seen to liking it.
Yeah. This is the too cool for school kids. They still want the work read out.
Yeah,
They still want you to say, "Oh, by the way, look what Johnny's done. He's
yeah, they
actually
love
done
it.
some
Yeah,
great piece of work today." But just they'll pretend that they're not happy
yeah,
with that, but
they love it. Yeah,
they're glowing inside. And particularly if they're vulnerable or quiet or not very successful student, to then have somebody celebrate their work when they've put in 10 times as much effort because it's much harder for them is again gold dust. You can't, if you get any of those opportunities to celebrate the success of somebody that has previously been a disciplinary or work issue problem,
yeah,
brought those problems to you, then do not miss that opportunity. You can do that quietly in a conversation if you know that child does not want it to be public, or you can do it public if you think that that works as well.
brilliant.
Um, hugely important, all of that stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah, and the other thing is, you probably come on to the form tutor, but when we finish off, but occasionally a bit of humour.
yeah,
Got to be careful. It can get
yeah,
out of hand. You can
yes,
lose hold of it very quickly. But having a sense of humour, laughing at yourself, when you really get to know the classes, laughing at each other, then that again, that some people find that easy to do. You were somebody who used humour a lot and you were comfortable with it. You were very good at that and renowned for it. Other people I've worked with would avoid it assiduously because they
yeah.
couldn't do it and they knew it would go automatically wrong. So humour, I mean, because it's something you found easy. Talk about that. How did that work for you?
Um, yeah, well, it was a key strategy that I've used in class, but I think the important thing about humor is I'm often the butt of the joke, as you
Mm,
say, make it out of yourself.
yeah,
What we don't want to do, um, unless you've got you're really well in with the kids. You don't really take the mickey out of the student. I could do a lot of wordplay with students and a lot of cheesy dad jokes, and I think that's really the point I was going to come to next. Is I build this in is like build relationship time into lessons. The problem that many new teachers have, which I also face, I've got to get this done in the 60 minutes, but have 30 seconds where, right, we'll have a laugh about it. Oh, that did look funny on that video. Or let's tell you something that happened to me at the weekend. And then, yeah, let them have a laugh. My brother was driving me to work and my car wasn't working once and half asleep. I opened the door and I got into a car and it wasn't my brother's. I'd got into the wrong car and I was, oh my God, and panicked and really sorry, got out, found my brother's car. So I went in and told my form that straight away. And, they found that hilarious. So I'm the butt of the joke. And I think humor really worked for me. I think I did find it natural. I didn't get into the odd time you think, oh God, I shouldn't have said that. But I agree with you. I've seen teachers doing it badly. And will come to be yourself next. I'll ask you to be. So if you're generally someone that likes a bit of wordplay or a pun, um, so like there's a JLS song years ago. If you're in love, put your hands up. And a girl who loved them I knew she liked them that I taught, and she shouted out in class. So I just sang to her, "If you want to talk in my class, put your hands up." And then became a bit of a joke in class. So you just got to act quickly to what the kids like and just have a bit of fun with it. But it's not. I totally agree. It's not something you should go into if you can't cope with it, and you've got to think about it. Especially if you're gonna maybe overset the mark, you can't be doing that. I wouldn't say in the good old days we couldn't, but now you're far more likely to get into trouble, I think,
No,
than if you say something that's going to be seen as offensive,
yeah,
which of course you shouldn't do, anyway. But yeah, I think also not just the humor, but building a little bit of relationship time into the lesson. What I mean by that is tell an anecdote about something that happened to you. Just have that little bit of extra time. If you got it, it breaks up the lesson. If you're thinking this is too much writing or it's too quiet, take a step aside and just go off on one for a bit. I did sometimes plan that into lessons. I taught some quite difficult classes in my career, and sometimes yeah, I'd say if we get that done right, we're going to have 5 minutes of a YouTube video that you want to
yeah,
watch, and yeah,
it'll
then we
reward
can
you.
have a little chat about it. And
Yeah,
that can take a little bit of taking a risk at times because you might think, oh, can I do that as a teacher? But I think you can, and I think that can go a long way into building relationships.
yeah.
I just want to ask you about being yourself and how the importance of being yourself as a teacher. You kind of alluded to it. What are the dangers of trying to be something you're not, do you think, in building
Oh,
relationships?
yeah, as in any other relationship in life, you'll not pull it off. Well, you will
Yeah.
for a while, and then you'll get found out. It's an interesting one because, of course, being a teacher is being an actor. I mean, you're performing five or
Yeah.
six
Oh, yeah.
times a day, often in front of very different audiences each time. Primary school teachers are performing to the same audience relentlessly, so it's a somewhat slightly different skill base. It's very so. I asked myself, was I in front of my classes all those years, myself fully, or some version of it? I think some version of it,
Mm.
and that version would change. I'd like to think I was pretty much myself. I think it was, I was honest. I think that the students knew that if I said I was going to do it, I was going to do it. I was straightforward. I think they knew that I was a person that was not to be crossed, but they knew I was on their side,
Yeah.
and that didn't waver. They didn't. They would that would my renown for that would go before me. That he's a good bloke, but don't get on the wrong side of him, and he is on our
Yeah.
side, and he will listen and understand. And I think I'm that way as a person. So in that respect, I think it was a continuity. But yeah, there are times when you know you're acting and you've got to put
Mm.
on a performance which is to be more stern and strict and horrible that day than you ever
Yeah.
want to be. Or sometimes when you feel that you really need to crack down on the kids, you find yourself going in the opposite direction because some little thing will happen, a bit of laughter will be introduced, and you just relax. But
Yeah.
I think that's what you're getting at. That you, you can be a very good teacher by pretending to be somebody else, but it's hard. I mean, that's a strain.
Yeah.
Doing that for year after year after year is very, very difficult. There's only a few that
Yeah.
can pull it off, and eventually you get found out to be a fraud. Once you have, and it could take a year or two. Once you've decided this is my persona in the classroom, and it's pretty much me, kind of, and it kind of works, stick with it.
Yeah.
I don't think that's answering your question. It's quite a
100%.
difficult question to get right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think yeah, the point is yeah about the importance of being who you are because you've got so many different areas you're dealing with in a school day of a student. If you're trying to be something you're not, what I noticed we had when I first started, we had a couple of real old timers in our school who kind of had the perfect, or as we saw, the perfect classroom management, and they weren't using anger or anything. And I saw a lot of teachers for the first few years trying to replicate these, especially two people. And I think I've seen in being a teacher trainer. for PGC students coming to my classroom, I've seen people trying to copy some of my methods, and some you can and some you can't. And I think the thing is, don't just try to be who you are. And so many different ways to do this job. I think myself, it took me a while to find. I really like what you said about a persona because that's what it is, and you've got to find it. And I think I got advice from people, including you, about going two-way one way or two-way the other. So I think it's really important that it is an act. It's you, but you're being you in front of 30 people, students. So you've got to just make sure that you stick with that. And yeah, a lot of it is acting in
There's
sometimes we tell
a
students
little
off.
anecdote for me. Sorry, Ollie, a little anecdote
Yeah,
for me about one of those old timers, the old tyrants I described. There was one with a little bit more nuance about him, and I remember he would obviously have kids in rows in absolute silence, and if they breathed in the wrong direction, they'd be in trouble.
right.
A few years earlier, he would have been caning or strapping them for the same minor infractions. So it's that
Sure.
sort of time. And I um, remember saying to him, every single class you ever teach, his name is Tony, every single class you ever teach is conducted for an hour in complete silence.
God.
Complete. And he said to me, and as if I was saying, I wish I could do that to that level. And of course, at that stage early on, I couldn't,
Yeah.
or wasn't even trying to, maybe. And he said, Terry, he said, it's a way to survive, and gave me a
Right.
very particular look. And what he was telling me very honestly is, I haven't got what you've got, son. I can't
Interesting.
engage
Yeah.
with these kids the way you are naturally doing. This is the way I was taught. This is the only way I know. I can't deviate from it because I'm limited. And it really struck me.
Yeah.
He wasn't prepared to go that far
Interesting,
telling me
isn't it?
that, but that's what I inferred from it, and I think I was right.
Yeah.
Um, you know, the if you, not that you're going to see people like that today, but if you are limited, you've got a limited arsenal. Make sure that arsenal's really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the point. I think we're all
No.
different, but I think that's how it's harder now because you have to have many more arrows to your in your quiver. Is that right?
Could
That's
be.
what it's called now. Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got to have a range of arrows rather than the two that you used to get away with having 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Make sense?
That's fine. I think that's really, yeah, really, really true. And I think I would encourage any listener to take a risk, try a few things. Don't different classes, and as I said earlier, beginning different year groups, different classes, you got to act differently and just try it because you don't want to lock yourself in as I'm Mr. Hardener who's just got to, have that for the whole year group because would you really be happy doing that for a whole year? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Linking on to that, I just wanted to quickly touch before we finish on form tutoring about when things
Yeah.
go wrong and where we find it hard to build relationships. We've both taught thousands of students, and I think I know you have, and I'd like to think I have been fairly successful in building relationships and being seen as some of the teachers we can have, but not always. And some students just can't crack that nut. So, yeah, any advice on what you think we could do, or what teachers should do there
Well,
when
they
things
don't.
break
I mean,
down?
don't be afraid if it's something's intractable and not working. Don't be afraid to try something different.
Yeah,
And even if it's breaking some golden rule you have for yourself, um, seek advice. There are people out there you unexpectedly are just very good with those kids. They may be quite junior. They may be very,
definitely.
very different from you. They may be the
Yeah,
people you just don't expect. I go into a lot of classrooms, as you know, and you're never sure until the teacher opens their mouth or the kids slide into the classroom what that relationship is. I mean, very quickly you realize what it is. Sometimes I'm surprised. Sometimes it's people that I look at and think, and I look at the kids and think, going to struggle. No, the opposite. You never know. So there are
interesting.
surprising people to seek advice from. And as I say, if you've got the chance, we've mentioned this before, go and watch them. Go and watch
Yeah,
them with the same children,
yeah,
and and then learn because they'll have the different ways, and you'll think, yeah, I could do a bit of that without changing completely. And be prepared to do things that are almost false. So the example I've had on my piece of paper is, a kid that's giving you a lot of trouble, gives everybody a lot of trouble, let's say, it's just difficult behavior management and they have their own needs and so on. use a bit of reverse psychology, get that student to one moment and said, look, could you, I really need a bit of help in this classroom. Could you be my helper? Could you
Yeah,
give out the books? Could you do this? Could you do that? Particularly if they're academically limited, which often tends to go hand in hand with behavioural
sure.
difficulties too. Not always, but it tends to. They it's not a natural place for them to be, and they struggle being there. So give
Mm,
them some autonomy, give them something to do, give them a role. Um, Even if they realise it's a bit false themselves, maybe
yeah,
occasionally, it's something. It's
yeah,
something. You've sometimes, and again, watching other colleagues, they'll have these little things, these tiny little things that just work that
yeah,
you don't know about. That's what
yeah.
I suggest anyway.
Yeah, excellent. Now I love that about other colleagues. I'm actually doing it with a couple of teachers at the moment. I've asked the volunteer teachers, it's been really good that they've helped to allow people to watch them. Yeah, the little roles thing's fantastic. We'll talk in another video maybe another time about the reasons for classroom management because I spent a lot of time as you know as lead teacher for gifted and talented and I was dealing with quite a few challenging students from behavior who perhaps found it too easy, so some interesting stories there.
Yeah,
All
other
I would
side,
add
yeah,
to that is to if things aren't going well and you're with that student, just remember that they are children. Okay, we've both taught up to 18 adults, but especially primary, that let's be the adult in this situation. Let's
yeah,
not take it personally.
yeah,
And let's always give a fresh start. The worst thing you can do is think, right, me and
yeah,
that, we're now going to butt heads for the rest of the term. Every lesson,
yeah,
you've got to be the one lined up. Always line up my kids in the class, no matter what's gone on the lesson before, they're getting a friendly hello. Whether they're my favorite or not favorite, they're getting on well with me or not, or whether I like them or not, or whether I'm annoyed with how rude they were. The next lesson, it's a fresh start. And I think that's really
yeah.
vital to understand.
You're the adult, you're the professional. Be bigger
Yeah,
than
exactly.
that's
Exactly.
you can't
They're
you
13, they're 14. Let's not it's weird because we spend most of our day with children. We've got to still remember, look, I'm here as a professional, I'm here as the adult, and I think it's really important to remember when things go wrong, and they will do. And I've spoken earlier about having the detention and the conversation, and I've had great success with that. But I've also had it not work. However, you look for different angles, but you also remember that there's other things going on. It's very rarely, it does happen, but it's very rare that you're the only teacher having this with a student.
yeah,
And if you are, ask yourself why. It might be you're going
yeah,
different, the wrong
yeah,
way to dealing with that. It's like I always like think being a teacher is like being a sports manager, a football coach, or whatever. Some kids need to kick up the proverbial, other kids need a pat on the back, and you've
yeah,
got to get to know the kids. And once you
yeah,
build that relationship, you know which kid. And sometimes, as we both have had, some of the toughest kids, they like the stern, right? That's not happening. Bang, here's what's going on now, and then that works. Whereas others, that won't work with them, and then you'll maybe get a bit of resentment for that, and you'll get a negative relationship from their point of view further on from there. I wanted to finish today about building relationships. Just a few tips from us on being a form tutor, because of
yeah.
course, secondary wise, what I'm coming from here is the key to building relationships. So,
Well, yeah,
really,
just to put in, you
yeah,
were one of the best I'd worked with. It meant a lot to you. It probably meant more to you being a form tutor than it did to other colleagues. So you should lead entirely on this one because it's something that you were very good at and put a lot of work into.
oh,
What did you do? It
thanks.
worked.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't. It's funny because I didn't know that's the angle I'd be looking at until I started. Yeah, it was really, yeah, I just absolutely loved it. I first got I was an NQT and I got a year seven, and in that school it was seven till the day they left. It wasn't vertical, and we didn't change year by year. So
Yeah.
I
Stayed
had
with them.
quite my first form. I had a form with a lot of characters, a lot of things going on, a lot of quiet students, and a lot of not so quiet students. And I just thought, yeah, I want to be a person, as you said, that the safe person, the person they can go to. Of course, some of them tried it on, and some of them tried to use me to get them out of things they didn't want to do. But I think building a relationship with them was absolutely fantastic, and it can spread out because then they'll talk to others about who you are and what you do, and that obviously gets home, and they'll have many of them will have siblings, and then it will often will be younger, so it can really, if you're a strong form tutor, it can really have a positive influence on you throughout the year group. You'll become known within the year group, and then obviously into future year groups. So yeah, I think the first a few things that I did as a form tutor was made form time active. So it might only be 20 minutes in the afternoon, but it wouldn't be okay, sit down, chat. I'm just going to sit here, do the register, and be bored for the next 20 minutes. Got to go above and beyond. There's a lot of work going into this, but once a week we'd have a quiz. Now either I'd design it or they'd design it, and if they designed it, I'd help them. And that quiz could be about things in the news, or it could be things that have gone on within their own year group that I didn't even know about. They loved that. Form time is a really good time. You said earlier about getting these quieter students to stand up. So what I used to do is get them to present. So that could be presenting on anything they want. It could be something like we had one quiet girl in the school and in the form, and I didn't know for a long time she was doing Duke of Edinburgh. And then suddenly I got her to present on the hikes she was going on over the weekend. It was absolutely fantastic. Um, Things like discussions. So we like used to watch. Like I used to make sure I'd watch everything like X Factor, Big Brother, just so I had an in with the conversation with the kids. So there's a thing on Big Brother called Hot Topics. So we did a Hot Topics once a week, where we'd do it from anything that they wanted to discuss, and I'd obviously make sure it was kept sensible and stuff, and I'd use it to eke out different perspectives. But they used to queue up to want to present hot topics. As I said earlier about clips, we say, okay, on a Friday or a Thursday, right, you come up with some comedy YouTube clips. Of course, you got to vet them. But yeah, I mean, from there you can get characters in the form. So yeah, I introduced them to Alan Partridge and stuff, and they didn't know Alan Partridge, they absolutely loved him, and things like that really build relationships. And then you get form quotes that you can then use as inside jokes going through the form as well. I think, as I said, it's a bit of work, but just every now and again, a little competition. Cut up pictures of the forms, stick them together. Just simple things. I've got to work out who's cut up with who, things like that. One thing I did, which I really think helped with building relationships, was I chose a boy and girl of the week from the first, maybe not the first week, but from the very start to the very, very end. And every week it would be either something I'd seen, or I'd make their friends tell me, or I'd just ask another member of staff in the staff room. And we'd not only have boy or girl of the week, but we would then they'd get a bar of chocolate or something that I'd buy, and a letter home, an email home. And a lot of parents when they left, you get the thank you cards. Always mention that, because one thing we don't do as much in secondary is perhaps praise. So I think just a little thing where a kid is probably not the best, gets a letter home always on a Friday, give them a nice weekend, something like a boy and girl of the week goes well. And little things like I used to do things like compliment walls where I'd get them to anonymously, I'd have a student's name in the middle and pass it around the class, maybe once or twice a year, and get each student to write something nice about another one. I'd then cut it up, I'd put it on a wall on the classroom wall, make it into a brick wall with each brick or whatever. Had something nice about student X is blah blah blah. And the kids, especially the quiet ones who didn't know that's how their peers thought about them, really liked that. I think with being a form tutor, it's really making time, making sure you get to know the students. As I said, I used to purposely allow them break and lunchtime. Apart from we had cakes on a Friday as a humanities team, and yeah, I could get on with my work. But it was just a time where even sometimes the cool kids would come and then they'd go off and they'd go and do their sport or whatever. But often the kids who found it hard at break time, who didn't like to be in a big dinner queue, would rather eat their sandwiches in a nice quiet place in a form room. So that's a safe space. And from there, you get to know about the students. And from there, you get to know about the parents. And parents will ring you up and say, my my mother or father died, please keep an eye on this student. And then, I'd let one student stay behind after class and got them to do a card and whatever. And little things like that as a form tutor allows students to know that you're there for them. And the form room is a real place of belonging. I had one lad, I'll tell you his name off recording, who, yeah, it was quite a hard lad. He came to school with a big reputation, but, we used to have to do book reading once a week, a school thing, and we'd get a books from the library, and no one was interested. So I said, right, I'm going to bring in some of my football mags. You can flip through them and you can read. And he read them, and I allowed him. I'm a big Tottenham fan, and he was a West Ham fan, and I allowed him to put his little West Ham mini kit on the form wall. And I made a big joke. Oh, it's just, I've got to look at that all day. It's out of order. But just a little thing like that, where this kid he had a little place in the school where he had his West Ham kit on the wall. Didn't have that many lessons there, but just little things like that, I think, really helps to build relationships with the students, where you can see them as as an individual person, and then you'll get the quiet ones. And you can, through the hot topics or whatever, get them to shine in the form room. And they've got a community then of kids who might not acknowledge them out on the football field in PE. But for that 20 minutes a day, or that lunch or break, or that 1 hour, we used to do PSE, an hour a week. And I know some teachers would just chuck their hand out on smoking or whatever to them.
Sure.
But for me, that was probably I love that lesson. Now, humanities teacher, we have similarities with the class, so it was a good thing to do that. But even then, you'd make that the time where the kids could have time in there with their form tutor and with each other, and you could really build a strong community. I know we haven't got much time, but we'll maybe do something longer on form. But even
Yeah, we should have a whole session on forms.
yeah, things like PE days, sports days. You spend the whole day watching them. I used to, on a hot day, go to the local sweet shop we had at the end of the school, and buy cans of drink and stuff. And yeah, it's a bit of money, but it's not too much. And things like just simple things like end of term. You mentioned another one, end of term parties. We used to do that. We used to do boy and, as I say, for boy and girl of the week every term. If it was Easter, I'd put all the names in a hat for that half term, pick one out, and then the top two get an Easter egg or something like that. Finally, because I'm rambling now, as I said, little make use of the outside world. So great thing to do in form to build relationships. If there's a European Championships or World Cup, do a sweepstake if your school allows. The first one we did, I did with them was Euro 2004, and I remember it now. One girl got Greece. Everyone laughs. They're rubbish. And of course, they went on to win
Isn't
it.
it?
She got
Yeah.
30 quid, a lot of money, and things like that. Fantastic. The final thing I'll say is being a good form tutor and building relationships. There will be times when they will tell you things that you have to make clear that you cannot keep secret. We
Yeah.
maybe talk a lot
Well,
more
of
about
course.
another one.
Yeah, the
And we
safeguarding
must
rules.
always go through the school procedures on things like that. But that's probably for another day. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
my summary on a
Yeah,
rant on
yeah,
early
no,
week.
no. We must come back to form tutor again. We've got a
Yeah,
lot to say, and I think it was a good summary of what you did well, and the benefits of the role. I'll just end with again an anecdote that it's not. It's sometimes just the attempt to get to know a child and for the child to realize that you're trying to do the best for them in difficult circumstances.
yeah.
That can be enough. You might not actually succeed. One particular case, no names to be mentioned, when I was up in the north many years ago, a boy came to our school from who'd been expelled from other schools with a very, and I mean a very notorious reputation. All the other kids in the school that he arrived at, my school, were clearly scared to death of him, and with good reason. And he went on, once he'd been expelled, eventually from our school as well, to be really quite a renowned and feared criminal in the Merseyside underworld.
Oh,
Really a career criminal. And he had all the wrong attributes, should we say, early on were quite evident. However, between one of his prison terms, many years later, New Year's Eve, I remember up in Southport, and this guy appeared at my shoulder, full of muscle now, which he'd built up at the gym, full of tattoos, breathing alcohol in my face, giving me a bear hug. Mr. Wood, he said,
brilliant,
you tried, didn't you? You really
brilliant.
tried. I remember that you really tried the best for me. And I've never forgotten that.
That's great. That's brilliant. That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. You tried, yeah, and they'll know that, and they might not always show it. And as we've said, some of them will purposely not show it, but then they'll show it. They'll talk to you one to one, or you'll get a letter, and that's what's great about the job. Not the lad I spoke about earlier wasn't ever at that level, and I know of him still, and he's not that level. But I remember one just finish on a funny story. He was a mixed race lad, and my children are mixed race, and I made a big point of bringing in family stories into the forum, and I remember my daughter, my mixed race daughter, was starting school, and he came up to me, and he was probably about year, I don't know, 7, 8, and he said, "She has any problems in the school, you let me know, and I'll go over there and sort it out because I'm mixed race too." And that was really sweet, and it was funny, and I just thought, yeah, nice one. Okay,
Yeah,
I think that's it for
good.
time. We could carry on for ages, but we're going to break it
We
up
could.
obviously into different videos. Thanks for
I
that,
mean, we
Terry.
should say that we'll do a separate one, which is about classroom behaviour management. And
Yes.
the uninitiated might say, well, what's the difference? There is a difference. It's about those routines and things that really work and following
Yeah.
systems and all of that. And just goes alongside what we've talked about.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll do that soon. So if you'd like to get in touch, please like this channel, follow, get your friends to follow and subscribe. And if you have any questions about anything we've said, please email us at Terry and Olly Talk Teaching at gmail.com, and we will happily get back in touch with you. So that's all for today. Have a nice week at work, Terry, and I'll be back in touch soon.
We will. We'll keep at it. Cheers, mate.
Cheers.
Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
Speak to you later. Bye.
Bye.